Hi, this is Janine Vague, and today we're going to be talking about romantic delusion. And what I'm saying about this is that it's dissociation that's hit by Cupid's arrow. So let's think about what that might look like when we imagine ourselves on a second or third date and you're with a really handsome person. There's something that draws you into their face. It's their smile, their eyes, their generosity, their warmth. You find yourself getting so caught up in all of these things. But then you come home and you're talking to your friends on the phone, or you're talking to your therapist or your family, and you're telling them about this date that you've been on. And you're trying to answer their questions, and you can tell them basic things about this person. You can tell them where he works. You can tell them what their age is, siblings, things like that. But when it comes to answering more intimate questions, things such as what his previous relationship was like, what he wants for the future in regards to relationships, any tensions that might come up, or I'm sorry, any tensions that might have been instilled in you from hearing this person talk to you about these intimate details. It might have triggered you in some way, because when something of substance is being brought up in an intimate setting, in a relationship dynamic, even though it is just a date, these are things that could trigger us. And that's where we draw a blank. That's the dissociation that I'm talking about. So I made another video before this one that's called How to Have a Healthy Relationship After a Narcissist. And I brought in the term romantic delusion as one of those reasons that gets in the way from us having a healthy relationship. And so this is something that generally begins to happen, I should say, in the early stages of a relationship, but then it continues throughout the relationship in various ways. But what I'm more concerned with is the fact that it gets started and that it's building on something. And that's the most pertinent thing to this discussion. So a lot of times people who are dissociating in a relationship, we're already conflict avoidant or anxious. So when we feel triggered by something, we dissociate. Often we're afraid to assert ourselves at all and don't even tell this potential partner what our needs and wants are in a relationship. We spend so much time focusing on them, and our own self takes a seat in the realm of our unconscious. A lot of times we don't even realize that we've been triggered. It took me a lot of years. I've been through this myself. And so it took me a lot of years before I started to get a grip on what was happening when I was on a date with someone. And I started to begin pulling this together, and I began looking at this with my clients and kind of listening to them speaking to me about what was happening on a date. And that's when I began to see that, there's a pattern here. There's something going on that I think is worth talking about and discussing, because having this dissociation, it's not enough to just know it. Then you have to know how to be grounded by this, how to get grounded with this. So this is all of what I'm talking about when I'm having this discussion about romantic delusion. So, all right. So what's happening is when you are dissociating, when you're not remembering what the person specifically said, when you're going to your friends or to your therapist and you're saying, well, I think he said something about this. Well, yeah, I remember this part of what he said, but I don't remember the rest of it. That's because you were dissociating. And what's happening instead is that you're turning that around and you're saying, but he's so handsome and he has a really good job. He seems like a gentleman. He's a really nice guy. So that's the romance. You're building something from the discussion with all that dissociation. So it's like you're building an image of what you want this person to be. You're building details in your head. You're building expectations about how you want that person to be in the relationship. This is all beginning to form at this first few dates, and this continues going on and on until we get to a point where we start really seeing the truth about this person. Then we start going into denial, and then with the denial, then we are setting up the stage for ourselves to be traumatized, to become victims. And that's not taking away from what they're doing and saying it's okay what they're doing. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we have to take responsibility for our actions and for what we're doing, because we're not going to be able to shift our consciousness and be in a better relationship with somebody in the future that's healthy unless we are able to start getting grounded in what is happening to us when we are meeting a narcissist, a mentally ill person, a person who is using substances. We need to get a grip on what are we doing here so that we don't meet this kind of person again. Or if we do meet them, we're able to say, hasta la vista, this isn't going to work for me because I need a healthy person. And I'm not going to sit here and go into denial once again and pretend that if I just love him a little bit more, he's going to stop drinking, or he's going to go to the therapist and work on himself, or he's not really a narcissist. Okay? Do you get where I'm saying here? All right. So, and let's go over dissociation again. What does that look like? I don't know if you remember when you were in school and people might say, oh, he's such a space cadet. That's dissociation. Autopilot, there but not there. It's a state of mind that many people who've experienced trauma understand. We don't know what it is, but we don't always realize when we know what it is, but we don't always realize when we're doing it. So thinking back to when I was a child, I like to remember when I would be staring out the window a lot of times at my school, because we had lots and lots of windows, which is wonderful. It's great. It's great for a creative mind. But when you're trying to pay attention to the teacher and you've been focused on that window for so long, you don't have a clue what the teacher is saying. And so then I would sort of get back in my body as a child, listen to the teacher again, and I'd be stuck. It was like, crap, I don't know what they're talking about. And I didn't even know how much time I had just missed. But I knew I was really missing some key points because I just didn't know where we were going in the discussion. And I was too afraid to ask a question, obviously, because I thought I was doing something wrong. I thought I was being this creative person looking out the window. I thought, well, I had just been looking at the bird flying in the background, but it could have been 30 minutes for all I know. It could have been 10, 15 minutes. It could have been 1 minute. I really don't know. I didn't know back then. But I did think I was doing something wrong. And later I would find out it was dissociation. Now, when I went to psychology at the university, I found myself, now I'm hitting some real traumatic topics in many circumstances. And I'm reading things that are hitting home for me on some level. And so I began to notice that I'm reading the same thing over and over and over again. Have you ever noticed that you do that when you're reading a book? Maybe it happens to you with nonfiction books, but it may also happen to you with fiction. So what I try to do is I try to highlight the passage, because if I'm going through it over and over again, it kind of gives me a sense that I bet I'm supposed to know this comment, and maybe that's why I dissociated, because something in my mind, in my unconscious, was a little afraid to listen to whatever it was saying in that book. So I highlight it, and then I take some time to really sit with it and think about it. And 9 times out of 10, that's what it was. I was supposed to have listened to that. It was supposed to be something very important for me to learn. Okay, so that's a little bit about dissociation. Now, sometimes when I'm dealing with clients who are surviving trauma, they might be dissociating with me in the room, but I don't see it because we're having a conversation and the conversation seems to go in a flow. I'm not necessarily noticing that they're dissociating, because it can happen while somebody's talking to you. It's not necessarily like a kid staring out the window. It's not always that obvious. I've noticed myself sometimes when I'm making videos that I start going off in my head while I'm talking to you and making the video. So you're not necessarily going to notice that, even if you want to watch my videos and see them, unless you're a darn good body language expert. But so this is what happens. And then my client might come back the next week, and then they're kind of angry with me because they're like, well, Janine, you told me I had PTSD. I mean, that was pretty heavy. I didn't know I had PTSD. How come you said it like that? You just kind of threw it out there. And it's like, oh, wow, I made a mistake. I didn't realize I had done that to the person, that I had harmed them, because we were flowing in this conversation. So I thought everything was okay. So that's how sometimes dissociation can work itself out in the therapy room with me. But imagine if that's how it's happening with me, how is it happening in a relationship? You're dissociating with your partner, and then you're getting angry with them about something. And sometimes it's because we assume we've heard them say things, because that does happen a lot of times, and that has to do with insecurity. It has to do with inserting words that somebody didn't really say, which is why when I do couples counseling, I do the Gottman-Rappaport method, because I do couples counseling using the Gottman training that I took. And that is having a person feedback what they've just heard to their partners, so that we can begin to see, well, no, he didn't use the word stupid, or he didn't say to you that you don't know anything about this. And then we can explore that further and realize, oh, okay, I was inserting this word. And we can talk some more about that. So that's how it happens in a relationship. That's an example of how it can happen in a relationship. So anger is one of the most difficult symptoms to disappear, I guess is a good way to say it, with post-traumatic stress disorder. I do cognitive processing therapy with my clients, but I started noticing there was a pattern of people still being a little angry. So I contacted somebody and found out, yeah, that is something we've done some research on, and there are lots of journal articles about that, but I didn't know that. So I've been reading some papers on that and putting a little bit more thought into this. So, all right. So anger is a difficult symptom to let go of, and it strongly correlates with attracting the wrong person over and over again. Because if you've got this anger surrounding you, then that's the image that's coming forward when you're meeting somebody, angry, and then you're still vulnerable and you're still attracting vulnerability. Got me? All right. So that's what I want to talk about, all of that. Now, so let's look at Cupid hitting your dissociation with his arrow. The narcissism, the addiction, the mental illness, and any other red flags are going to go flying out the window. We are smitten, and all of our common sense, our boundaries, our sense of self becomes caught up in making this person right, okay? Building excuses for them, becoming a slave to their emotional manipulation, taking care of them. And that's where we get into financial, emotional, sexually, doing whatever it takes to make sure they are protected. In the meantime, your family and friends can see, yeah, this guy seems a little off to me. They may not know exactly how to explain it, but we're so caught up in this romantic delusion that we're not listening. And we're going back, we're making the guy right. So we're so focused on paying attention to that and not paying attention to what they're trying to tell us. They're feeding back to us, not because they're jealous or not because they're a family member that you don't really get along with. It's somebody who gets these things, who, because they're not in love with him, so they're able to see things that you're not able to see. So anyway, so all right, so that is what romantic delusion looks like. So another thing that I've noticed is that unless my client is real clear that they're coming to see me as a survivor of a narcissist, it's going to take a few sessions before they begin to turn the delusion that they're dealing with at home into a reality. If they've broken up with their boyfriend, or they're ready to get a divorce, or they've been reading some articles online, then they're going to start coming in and saying some of the symptoms that they've read about in the articles, or they're just going to flat out come out and tell me he never says he's right about, he never says he's wrong about anything. He's lazy. He's not taking responsibility. I feel like I'm going crazy. He's always turning everything around that I say. So this means to me, a lot of times I'm like, you've been reading some articles, I bet. And so that's when they know what's going on. But some people, they need to build some trust with me. They need to have gotten a chance to see that I know what I'm talking about, that I'm a therapist that they're going to be able to align with and feel comfortable with. And then they are able to start divulging a little bit of details that sort of start slipping out in things about their partner. And sometimes even when they're doing that, they're not ready to hear the truth, which is okay. But I've had people that have been married for many years and they don't feel like the guy can make it without them. I get that. And I'm not there to make somebody to get a divorce. I'm just trying to help soothe them and support them as a therapist. So, but that's how the romantic delusion works. That's how it shows up in therapy. Let's see. Sometimes the comments that I will make to people will be, sounds like he has some narcissistic traits, because I can't ethically diagnose somebody who's not in the room. If there's alcohol or drug problems, I might say something like, it sounds like he's got some alcohol problems if he's drinking every single night. And this is getting in the way of your relationship, because with substance abuse, we consider it an abuse if, or dependency, if it is getting in the way of relationship or job or something that they are responsible for. So I will bring that into the picture. If he's, let's say, I might say something like, so he blacks out after he's drinking and doesn't remember where he parked the car. That's signaling to me that your partner has is abusing alcohol, or they're wasted, or whatever the case may be. So that's kind of how I bring that into the room. And when I'm talking about narcissistic traits, I do try to tell people, this isn't going to be any use to you to tell your partner, I think you're a narcissist. I've made that mistake as well. It's not a good thing to do, because then it's going to just cause narcissistic rage. And if you've already broken up with them or going through a divorce, then they're going to start threatening things like attorneys, which are most likely going to be involved if you're getting in a divorce. But if you're getting a divorce, they're going to be starting to be more difficult in getting that divorce. And by that, we're talking about children and money and things like that. So I'm sure you know what I mean. All right, so we've talked about the romantic delusion, how it begins. We are talking about focusing on their behaviors instead of our own behaviors, and that goes on during or post relationship. And again, I want to say this person is treating us badly, or they still are, but we have to take responsibility for our own actions if we want to go forward into a much healthier relationship going forward. And I love this quote by Dr. Wayne Dyer, and it goes, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. And what that means is, if you take personal responsibility and start thinking about who you were being in that relationship, you'll be able to step away from your anger a little bit and think about, wait a minute, there's a pattern that's happening with every single person I've been out with. And that's me. There's me in that mix there. And so those people that you've been out with, they don't know each other. So we have to look at our own personal responsibility, and then you begin to see things. And that's how I began doing work with survivors of narcissists, was thinking about these patterns, thinking about, wouldn't that be nice for somebody to have a therapist who could work with them on these things? So that's what I came up with. That's my niche. Okay, so how do we focus on our romantic delusion at this entry phase and when it comes up throughout the relationship? I think it's a good idea. It's a new idea I came up with, to have a dating coach. And that can be your therapist, because this is part coaching and part psychology that needs to be kind of brought together. And so there are some really good coaches out there who do have a good sense of mental health issues. So I'm not saying don't go to a coach. It's just I'm just putting that out there. But you want somebody who can help you to learn how to stay grounded during this initial phase, so you can begin to view the person in front of you and begin to discern decisions between what is that person really saying, and feeding back to that coach what they actually said, and letting them sort of not diagnose, but letting them sort of reframing it for you. Okay, what you heard was this, and what I'm feeling inside is I'm thinking that this is what's going on here. And then in that way, a person can say, oh yeah, I never thought about it that way. That does make sense. I was just helping somebody the other night to discern with a text message that they had. And so now we went over some different scenarios on how to handle that situation going forward, so that they can stay grounded in the discussion that we had, and then be able to make a decision based on whatever happens from the response to that discussion. All right, so tell the therapist what you want and what you need from a relationship as well. Make sure that they know what you're looking for in a partner, so that they can stay holding you accountable while you're going on these dates with the person. Okay. And then you've got this person who's got your back, so that you're not doing this alone. I think that is the most effective way to go forward and get in a healthy relationship with somebody, when you know you've been experiencing this romantic delusion and you're tired of that. You want to have the right person this time, and you want to get it right. So that's what I have to say for you today. And thank you for listening. I really enjoy making these videos. I enjoyed talking to you about these things. And I hope to see you soon with some more information in the future.